My 20-year work anniversary email came in like a fart in the wind, automated, timestamp 4:03 a.m. Subject line, congratulations, Olivia, no signature. No confetti gif. Just a glitchy JPEG of a balloon so pixelated it looked like a kidney stone. I stared at it for a second, then closed the tab. Nobody said a word. No thank you for your service, no cheap cupcakes in the break room, not even a passive-aggressive Slack emoji from HR. Just business as usual at Galleon Strategies, where loyalty gets you jack shit and the parking spot by the dumpster. I sat there, blinking at my screen, sipping stale breakroom coffee that tasted like someone filtered it through a sock. The calendar blinked a reminder for Derek's 10 a.m. vision casting meeting. The new COO, Derek with the gelled hair, the golf tan, the handshake that said, I use body spray called Ambition. Son of the founder's college roommate or tennis buddy or spiritual chiropractor, I forget which. The guy who once asked if my name was Olive during a leadership call. Here's where I should pause and say, if you're listening to this and you haven't subscribed yet, now would be a really swell time to hit that button and throw us a like. I mean, 90% of y'all are out here freeloading these stories like they're samples at Costco. Do it for the algorithm. Do it for my blood pressure. Do it so my team doesn't start charging me for emotional hazard pay. Anyway, back to the funeral of my dignity. I'd been with Galleon for 2 decades, not the loudest in the room, not the one hogging credit during sprint demos or shouting over interns during town halls. I was the glue. I built the intake systems that kept our government clients compliant. I wrote the onboarding protocol we still used for Fortune 500 clients, with little green checkboxes Derek probably thought were his idea. I trained most of the people who now outranked me, people who'd started as analysts when TikTok was still a key dollar ha lyric. But somewhere along the way, my name got small. Not just in meetings or emails, but in how people looked past me. It's a special kind of invisibility, a kind that grows like mold under fluorescent lights. And the thing about being invisible is you get to hear everything. People forget you're there. That's how I first heard Derek say it. We control her career now, he told a junior exec in the break room like he was talking about a chess piece. She'll take the package. Old loyalty types always do. I didn't flinch, just kept microwaving my sad little Tupperware of soup. He never even looked in my direction. I guess that's what triggered the first spark. Not the insult, not the firing, I'll get to that mess, but that phrase, we control her career now, like I was a lever on his dashboard. A settings toggle. Control, Derek? Sweetheart, I architected this company's compliance logic from scratch. I embedded enough audit triggers to make the SEC blush. I knew which servers had version conflicts and which licenses were still technically in my name. I had an access log so detailed it could tell you which execs skimmed through their own onboarding doc and which one copy-pasted from mine. So I nodded to myself that day, quietly, like a woman does when she realizes nobody's bringing the cake to her party because they already wrote her off the guest list. That kind of nod. By noon, I was packing up my desk. Not out of panic, not because they told me to, just because I knew what was coming. And I opened my drawer and saw the old fireproof folder with the red sticker, if they ever forget. I smiled for the first time that day. Some people write diaries. I write contingencies. They thought they were firing a relic. What they didn't know was they were yanking the keystone out of a very old, very quiet architecture. One I built, one they never really understood, and one that was about to remind them very publicly who controlled what. It happened on a Wednesday. Not that Wednesdays are special, just middle-of-the-road beige, like Derek's haircut and management style. He called it a vision day. Posters went up overnight in the lobby. Reshape, reinvent, reclaim. Some poor intern probably got yelled at for using a semicolon in the original draft. They catered breakfast, which was always a bad omen. Tray of cold bagels and room-temperature fruit meant someone in a suit was about to make a terrible decision and wanted to soften the blow with carbs. Sure enough, Derek stood up at the morning all-hands like a self-satisfied rotisserie chicken, bronzed, oily, puffed full of hot air. We're entering a new era, he began with that nasal drawl that made every word sound like a pitch deck. A flatter org, a leaner future. No more silos, no more dead weight. He smiled when he said that last part. I swear he looked directly at me, but maybe I imagined that. Maybe I wanted to believe he had the guts to look me in the eye before gutting my role. After the meeting, my inbox pinged with a calendar invite, private sync, Derek and Olivia. 30 minutes, no agenda, no witnesses. The kind of invite that smells like bleach and gaslighting. His office was still too clean. Like a catalog display, modern desk, fake plant. Framed quote on the wall that said something asinine like disruption is just the beginning. The man couldn't disrupt a paper towel roll without a consultant. He gestured to the chair across from him like he was about to read me bedtime stories. Take a seat, Olivia. I didn't. I stood. He smiled wider. Okay, cool, your choice. Look, I'll keep this short. We're reshaping the org, and unfortunately, your role is no longer aligned with our vision. I stared at him. Stone-faced, you've done great work. 20 years, that's amazing, he added like I was being inducted into a nursing home. But we're looking to the future now, and it's time for new leadership to step in and take us there. He slid a beige envelope across the desk like it was a party invite. This is a generous package. You've got 60 days of pay, 2 months of benefits continuation, and a glowing reference letter I've already signed. I didn't touch the envelope. Didn't blink, I just watched his face. Now he continued, crossing his arms like he was settling into a TED talk. You could fight this, you could get all legal about it, but that's not the Olivia I've come to know. You're not a drama person. That's when he leaned forward, eyes bright like a Labrador who'd just buried a bone. We control your career now. Take the package and go. It's cleaner this way. Cleaner. I looked at his hands, ones that never built a damn thing in their life. Soft palms, manicured nails, shaking ever so slightly. He thought he was being brave. He thought this was leadership. I reached for the envelope, held it up between two fingers like it was something I found under my shoe. Then I dropped it on his desk without opening it. I won't be signing anything today, I said, voice calm, even, practiced like reciting a grocery list. He blinked. Olivia, this isn't a negotiation. The decision's been made. I nodded, just once. The kind of nod that makes men like him nervous. The kind that says, you'll regret this, but I won't raise my voice about it. I turned and walked out, shoes echoing off the tile like punctuation marks. Past HR, past the glass meeting rooms where they pretended empathy was a brand value. Past the interns with their wide eyes and rising panic. Can they really fire someone like Olivia? They can. But that doesn't mean they should have. At my desk, I powered down slowly. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just unplugged my mouse, one cable at a time, took my mug, my notebooks, and most importantly, my fireproof folder. I left the beige envelope sitting neatly on my chair, a little going away present for whatever poor soul thought they were stepping into my shoes. I hope they enjoyed the crater I left behind, because Derek had no idea what he just poked. He thought he was kicking dust off a relic. What he'd actually done was unseal a loaded vault. The house was still when I got home, just the hum of the fridge, the soft creak of the floorboard by the back door, and the faint sound of my neighbor's wind chimes clinking like bones in a jar. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't kick off my shoes. I went straight to the linen closet in the hallway, reached behind the stack of winter blankets no one uses, and pulled out the box. Fireproof, waterproof, emotion-proof. I placed it on the dining room table like it was a ritual. 3 clicks of the lock, hinges groaning open like a throat clearing before confession. There it was, right on top, a tabbed folder labeled in Sharpie if they ever forget. 10 years ago, during the Galleon-Lexar merger, everything had been chaos. Compliance rewrites, contract backlogs, entire departments cannibalized and sewn back together. Everyone was too busy scrambling to notice the fine print. But I noticed, and I negotiated, not loudly, not with a lawyer in the room. I simply embedded one clause, one sentence, nestled like a razor blade inside a birthday card, into the updated terms of my employment. A phantom equity pool, tied to systems I built, with conditional authority that activated in the event of material damage due to leadership misconduct. Most people skimmed right past it, like a landmine under tall grass. The clause wasn't about revenge, not when I wrote it, it was about insulation, about building a life raft before the flood came, and now it was time to climb aboard. I unfolded the contract slowly, my fingers tracing the ink like braille. Page 47. Paragraph 12, subsection D. There it was, my lifeline, my fuse. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I picked up the landline, not my cell, not Slack. Landline, the one only one person still had the number for. He answered on the second ring. It's Olivia, I said. A pause, then is it time? I looked down at the contract, then back at the folder stuffed with incident logs, audit trails, flagged memos. All documented, all dated, all real. It's time, I said. No theatrics. No grand declarations, just those 2 words. After I hung up, I went to my office and opened the laptop I hadn't turned in. The one Derek didn't know existed. The one connected to my own private server. The one I set up in my garage during the 2017 compliance scare. I logged in. The dashboard blinked to life, project logs, retention reports, security alerts, timestamps. My archive, not the sanitized, watered down one they kept on the company drive. This one was raw, untouched, alive. I started tagging files. Emails where Derek overrode security protocols to speed up deployment, calls where he pressured legal to backdate vendor reviews, meeting minutes where timelines were repositioned to appease the board. He was reckless, and like most men born into authority, he left a trail. By midnight, I had everything bundled, encrypted, named the file Olive's recipe collection PDF, and stored it in 5 separate cloud vaults, each with a unique access key. I wasn't taking chances, not this time. I slept for 4 hours, dreamless, then woke up and did what I always do, made coffee, checked the news, fed the neighbor's cat while she was in Arizona. To the world, I was just a woman between jobs. A quiet, middle-aged professional with a severance package and a head full of regrets. But the thing about quiet women is, we tend to work while everyone else is shouting. And while Derek was busy parading around with his Vision 2026 PowerPoint and his smug LinkedIn posts about organizational efficiency, I was laying out a grid of landmines so precise, so legally sound, they'd have to thank me before they bled. It wasn't just about getting my job back. It was about control. Because if they were going to forget who I was going to make damn sure they remembered exactly what I'd built. The beautiful thing about burning quietly is that nobody sees the smoke until the rafters are falling. 2 weeks after Derek's vision day, the office started rumbling like a bad stomach after gas station sushi. Clients weren't responding to Q4 rollouts. Onboarding calls were mysteriously missed. SLA deadlines began slipping like wet soap. No alarms at first, just low murmurs on internal chat threads. Hey, did anyone else notice? Wasn't that SOP deprecated last year? Where's the updated licensing doc? I'd seen this before. Change management executed by a man who couldn't manage a drawer divider. Derek had yanked out the bolts holding the floor together and replaced them with TED talk buzzwords. And now the plates were shifting. From my living room couch, cat curled against my hip, laptop glowing like a co-conspirator, I watched it unravel. Galleon's internal Slack still hadn't revoked my passive observer account, a quiet little oversight from a lazy IT department I once handpicked. I scrolled through threads with names like #client salvage, #emergency retention, and my personal favorite, #WTF is happening. I saw a junior PM named Olivia take the fall for a timeline snafu Derek himself had caused. She was sharp, green, and entirely unprepared to be cannon fodder. When she submitted her resignation, I read her farewell message 3 times. Polite, firm, and heartbreakingly optimistic. I've learned so much here. Onward and upward. You deserved better, Olivia, but Derek needed a sacrifice to throw at the board, and middle management was softer than firing another exec, so she became the crack filler in his collapsing dam. Meanwhile, a ghost stirred in the machine me. One afternoon, I logged into my offline archive and saw something interesting. A script request had pinged the file path for my old compliance memos. Not a standard query, someone tried to delete them. Not remove from drive delete. I'm talking overwrite the version history delete. They'd used outdated legal permissions, and the audit log flagged it as a failed unauthorized attempt. Nice try, Eric from legal. I watched the log timestamp. It happened at 3:47 p.m. That same day, Derek posted on Slack, excited to announce our simplified compliance structure. Clarity breeds excellence. I nearly choked on my coffee. My memos weren't decorative. They were cross-referenced in vendor contracts, layered into onboarding protocols, and included as validation checkpoints for third-party integrations. Deleting them wouldn't just cause confusion. It would nullify several key system workflows, which meant one thing: Derek was panicking. And panicked men with power make glorious messes. I called my lawyer again, just a 2-minute check-in. They've started touching your work, he said. I know, I replied, opening the next log file, and they're doing it badly. HR eventually marked my status in the system as inactive. No call, no confirmation, just a quiet flick of the switch. I saw the status change in a buried back-end report I still had access to, thanks to a shadow license tied to an old system I built, and they never sunsetted. The kind of license Derek didn't even know existed because he'd told IT to consolidate legacy junk. Legacy junk, huh? He was stepping on landmines, and he didn't even know which decade they were from. Every day brought a new blunder: a misfiled tax document, an expired third-party cert, an acquisition prep file missing digital signatures I alone had authority to provide. The board hadn't noticed yet, but investors had. And when investors notice, the countdown begins. I watched it all unfold from the quiet hum of my kitchen, like a conductor with no baton, watching the orchestra tune itself into chaos. Validation wasn't loud. It didn't scream, "Look what they did to me." Validation just whispered, "Watch what happens next." And I did, with meticulous, ice-cold joy. The call came on a Thursday night just past 8:30. I remember because Jeopardy! Had just ended and I was halfway through a microwaved brownie that tasted like regret and office breakups. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen since the last company retreat: Sylvia Halpern, Senior Manager of Strategic Operations. Smart woman, a survivalist, the kind of person who never makes a call unless the ship's already taking on water. I answered on the second ring. Olivia. Her voice cracked like she'd been holding her breath too long. "It's Sylvia. Sorry to call so late. I didn't know who else to ask." I leaned back, kicked my feet onto the ottoman, and let the silence stretch. Let her fill the space. People always do. "I was in a strategy sync today," she said, swallowing hard. Derek brought up the weighted forecast integration report. "The 2021 one, the one you built." Of course he did. He pulled it up like he owned the thing, started quoting numbers, but it didn't make sense. The inputs weren't matching the client matrix. He got red in the face when Dev tried to ask about the dependency variables. I didn't say anything, just listened, sipping chamomile like it was bourbon. Sylvia inhaled sharply. "I have to ask, did you leave a version behind? Is there a walkthrough maybe? A draft? I mean, we can't find the source logic. Just says Galleon partial licensed use OHV 3.4 in the metadata." Was that you?" "They only licensed it," I said flatly. "Never owned it." The silence on the other end was almost warm, like static from an old radio tuned to the truth. She hesitated. "He's calling it proprietary. Claims it's our internal IP. But the clause, I think legal's starting to realize." She didn't finish the sentence. Instead, she asked, voice barely above a whisper, are you coming back? That one hit the air like a dropped pin in a courtroom. I could hear the fear in her tone, but also something else. Hope, maybe even loyalty. I hadn't expected that from Sylvia. She always played things too close to the vest to pick sides. I didn't answer. Just stared at the file I had open on my screen, Architect Clause Activation Guide PDF. I'd revised it the night before. Tightened the language. Highlighted Derek's violations, but I said nothing. Let her sit in that question. Okay, she whispered after a beat like the wind had gone out of her. I didn't mean to put you in a spot. If anyone can stabilize this thing, she trailed off. She knew, everyone knew. Then her voice shifted, lower, more conspiratorial. Between you and me, legal's panicking. I heard someone say the word exposure in the lunchroom. And Derek, he's snapping at interns. Snapped our client yesterday. I don't think he realizes what he's done. Oh, he didn't, not yet, but he would. Just do what you need to do, Olivia, she said quietly. Some of us remember who built this place, who held it together when the merger almost killed us. We haven't all forgotten. Then she hung up. I sat there still, the silence settling over me like ash, not triumphant, not gloating, just waiting, watching the weight of the house lean toward my side. I looked again at my screen, logged into the archival shell I'd built in 2015, intended for audits and due diligence, but now pulsing with something more potent, leverage. In another window, the current org chart flickered open. Derek's name at the top. Below him, a dozen others, some who knew better, some who didn't, all standing on foundations I'd laid and forgotten. Asset or agent? I smiled. Let them wonder. That was always my favorite position anyway. Not in the spotlight, just behind the curtain holding the switch. The email hit just before lunch on a Monday, a time normally reserved for soggy sandwiches and budget reallocations, but this one came straight from the lead investor's office. All caps subject line, urgent, acquisition timeline at risk penalty clause implications. There's something almost musical about panic written in corporate font. Cold, sharp, sterile. The board didn't forward it. They summoned legal. Within the hour, the chief counsel was pale, sweating through his collar like someone had just whispered the word malpractice into his salad. Because the thing about due diligence in a high-stakes acquisition is that it doesn't care about ego or vision decks. It cares about signatures, compliance locks, and unbroken chains of authorization. And one of those links had my name on it. Back in 2013, I'd helped design the compliance module that ensured all third-party data usage met international audit standards. It wasn't flashy. Wasn't the kind of thing execs bragged about at retreats, but it was essential. It sat buried in the architecture like a spinal cord, overlooked until it cracked. And during the merger rewrite, I'd quietly insisted that key activation protocols include dual auth signatures, one from the acting leadership, one from the originating system architect. Me. The clause was reviewed, approved, and buried, until now. Legal tried to activate the module to prep the acquisition docs for the buyer's team. The system spat out a denial, signature authority, incomplete, access rejected. And when they dug into the backend to override it, it didn't just block them, it triggered a compliance alert. Logged, time-stamped, archived. With a polite message I'd embedded years ago, please consult originating architect for final validation. Integrity is a legacy issue. That's when Derek panicked. And panic, as we've established, makes for good theater. He dragged out an outdated clearance form from some dusty onboarding binder and manually signed off on it himself, scrawling a forged timestamp like a kid cheating on a math test. Then he pushed it up the pipeline with a Slack message that said, greenlit for legal, moving forward. Let's go, let's nope. Within 40 minutes, the buyer's legal counsel caught the inconsistency. This isn't valid, they said. Protocol breach on signature integrity. Due diligence cannot proceed under these terms. Meeting canceled. Buyer postponed their evaluation call indefinitely. The penalty clause kicked in like a boot through drywall. 6 figures lost on a delay that never should have happened. The CEO's silence lasted 5 hours. Then, in a ripple of barely contained corporate fury, an emergency board meeting was scheduled for the next morning. Subject line simple, brutal. Governance failure, immediate response required. Derek tried to do damage control, but it was like watching a dog try to explain algebra. It's a minor tech hiccup, he told someone in finance. We're just waiting on a patch, but everyone knew. This wasn't a hiccup. It was a warning shot. The old systems, the ones he dismissed, minimized, laughed off, were suddenly the only thing standing between them and a full-blown acquisition collapse, and all roads led back to me. At 3:12 p.m., the company Slack buzzed with a message from a board member I hadn't heard from in 3 years. Olivia, if you're available, please check your inbox. The message sat there like a loaded gun on a kitchen counter. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I opened my archive and began compiling every failed override attempt, every compliance breach, every Slack message where Derek had ignored protocol to move faster. I added timestamps, versions, user IDs. By the time I finished, I had a PDF the size of a novella titled Governance Integrity Chain of Custody Report. I uploaded it. Sent it to exactly one email, the company's external audit liaison. No subject line. no message body, just the file. The last thing I did before shutting my laptop was update the access rights on my original compliance modules. And then I waited, because now the silence wasn't mine to hold anymore. It was theirs. The boardroom hadn't changed. Same frosted glass, same overpriced faux marble table, same dead ficus in the corner, overwatered, then forgotten, like every project this company didn't understand. Derek was already seated when I walked in. Of course he was. Buttoned up, hair sharp, smile twitchy. He looked like he'd practiced his talking points in front of the mirror that morning, probably muttering words like synergy and alignment between mouthfuls of protein powder. The other board members were tense. Some fiddled with pens. One rubbed his temple like he'd been halfway through a migraine when the call came in. The CEO, Arthur Langford, sat at the head of the table looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man trying to remember where his empire's floorboards had gone. I didn't say anything as I entered, didn't sit down, just walked to the far end of the table and placed a slim, leather-bound folder in front of me. One sheet inside, protective plastic cover, no fanfare. Derek cleared his throat, loudly. Before we begin, I'd like to say this is highly irregular. She's no longer an employee. This meeting is for active stakeholders and executive. Derek, one of the board members, cut in, voice flat. Sit down, he did. His jaw twitched like it was trying to file a lawsuit. Arthur looked at me then, eyes dim but curious. Olivia, thank you for coming in. We're hoping you can clarify a few things. I nodded once. Then, without a word, slid the folder across the table. It landed softly in front of the company's general counsel, Patricia. She'd been around since the Lexar merger. She knew the landscape, knew me. She flipped it open, pulled out the contract inside, and began scanning. Page 47, I said evenly, no emotion, just instruction. She turned to it. I watched her face change, not in a cartoonish way, not slack-jawed horror, but in a slow tightening around the eyes, a stillness, like she'd just realized the floor she was standing on wasn't a floor at all. Subsection D, I added. Her lips moved as she read. Then she stopped. Her gaze lifted to Arthur. She's right, Patricia said quietly. This clause was embedded during the 2013 rewrite. It was reviewed and ratified with the rest of the merger documentation. Arthur frowned. What clause? Derek started laughing, short, nervous, stupid. Come on, this is absurd. You're going to take one sentence from a decade-old contract over the actual executive team? This is a distraction. We're hemorrhaging investor confidence, and you're all letting a disgruntled ex-employee sit down, Patricia said, sharper this time. He shut up. She turned back to the document, her voice going steady, clinical. Clause 12, subsection D. In the event of documented leadership misconduct resulting in material damage, the originating architect of proprietary compliance frameworks holds temporary administrative oversight over said systems, including licensing, governance structures, and audit protocols. Someone exhaled, loudly. Patricia continued. That includes compliance assets tied to due diligence protocols, investor reports, and platform integrity, all of which are currently under restriction because they require her signature to unlock. Arthur leaned back slowly. So what does that mean in practical terms? Patricia looked directly at him. It means she's not an employee, she's a signatory authority, a structural administrator. And based on the wording, she glanced back at the page, then up again. She outranks Derek, and possibly you. The room went completely still. Even the ficus looked stunned. I watched Derek's face go pale, then flush, then pale again. A man watching his parachute open and finding someone else's laundry inside. He started to speak, then didn't. I finally sat down, no folder, no laptop, just me. Calm, composed, not angry. Just home, I folded my hands on the table and looked around the room. One by one, they all looked back. Let's proceed, I said. There's a lot of work to undo. And nobody, not even Derek, argued, because this wasn't revenge. This was restoration, and I had every right to be there. Patricia read the clause again, slowly this time, like it might rewrite itself on the second pass. But paper doesn't flinch and ink doesn't lie. In the event of leadership misconduct resulting in demonstrable material damage, she said, her voice like cold glass, the originating architect of the enterprise compliance infrastructure shall be granted temporary oversight authority over all systems, governance protocols, and licensing functions, per Charter B, Clause 12, subsection D. She looked up directly at the CEO. Olivia is not operating as a former employee. She is executing authority as a structural signatory under Charter B. You could feel it happen, the tectonic shift in the room, the kind of moment that doesn't need a voice to declare it. Phones stopped buzzing. Pens froze. People who once leaned back now leaned in. It was no longer a question of if this was real. It was how long they'd ignored it. Arthur Langford, same CEO who'd once called me the firewall whisperer during a holiday party after too many glasses of something expensive, just blinked. He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Wait, Charter B was absorbed after the Lexar integration. It shouldn't even be, it was ratified post-merger. Patricia cut in. Page 62 of the final consolidation binder. Your signature's on it, Arthur. Derek shifted in his seat like someone had poured hot gravel into his shoes. Okay, he said, with that nasal condescension that had worked so well on interns and HR reps. Let's not get carried away. This clause is symbolic. It doesn't override active leadership structure. Olivia has no title, no managerial authority. HR governs re-entry not. Patricia turned to face him fully. Her tone didn't rise. That made it worse. Derek, you fired your compliance architect, the one with sole authority over the licensing framework currently blocking our acquisition. You did this in the middle of a due diligence period, without legal review, without board consultation, and without reading the clause she built into the core operational charter of this company. She let that hang in the air like static, then added dryly, "You didn't fire a staff member. You fired your owner." Silence, not the silence of confusion, silence of consequence. The kind that makes people suddenly remember every ignored email, every skipped review, every time they nodded through a meeting they didn't understand. Derek blinked fast like his eyes were trying to load a new reality. No, that's not, this can't be binding. HR would have caught it. There were protocols, Patricia interrupted, her patience now stripped to bone, and she wrote them. A few board members exchanged glances, each one trying to calculate how much of this mess was traceable to their own decisions, or lack thereof. The man from finance, Wilcox, cleared his throat. So what exactly does this mean, today? Practically speaking, Patricia didn't look away from Derek. It means Olivia holds provisional oversight powers tied to every legacy system, including the compliance architecture, data governance workflows, and vendor authorization keys. She has legal authority to approve, deny, or reroute any actions affecting operational integrity until such time as an internal audit deems leadership restored to compliance. Another beat. Then she turned to me. Would you like to assert your rights now? I exhaled through my nose, calm, steady. My breathing was the only sound in the room. I already have, I said. Everyone just watched. Waiting. In the corner of the room, Derek looked down at his hands like they'd betrayed him. And all I could think, as my pulse slowed to a deep, precise rhythm, was this: you were so sure I'd stay quiet, so sure I'd walk away. But you never read page 47. And now you're reading me. I stood, no tremble, no anger, just gravity. My folder was already closed, tucked neatly under one arm like a sermon that had just been preached. The board waited. Derek, ashen, silent, looked like he was trying to melt through the chair. I looked at them all, my voice smooth as static before a storm. Here are my terms. The room inhaled. I don't want a title, I said. No VP, no senior anything. I answer to no department, no C-suite ladder, no chain of command. I want no team, no direct reports. No one wasting time scheduling coffee chats about synergy. A pause. I report to the board only. I oversee system compliance, architecture, governance, integrity. Everything I built, I keep. Every function that touches what I designed now answers to me. I held their gaze one by one. Let them feel it. My decisions are final, non-negotiable. Any override will trigger a system rollback and a formal notice to the investor group. Then, very casually, my compensation will triple. Silence, not disbelief, acceptance. They weren't shocked that I asked for it. They were shocked they hadn't thought to give it before. One of the directors, Jacobs, I think, whispered to the lawyer without looking away from me, "Can she do this?" Patricia didn't even glance up from the contract still resting in front of her. "She's not doing it, she already did." Arthur swallowed hard, his face pale under the fluorescent lights. "So we work for her now?" I didn't answer. Patricia did. Yes, one syllable. Sharp enough to cut through every illusion that had ever walked into that boardroom in a branded fleece vest thinking tenure equaled power. Derek stood slowly, like he wasn't sure how knees were supposed to function. He opened his mouth, no doubt about to bleat some final protest, but Arthur raised a hand. "Leave the room, Derek." That's all he said. No anger. Just the dry finality of a man who'd gambled with a system he didn't understand and lost the company's future to a clause he never read. Security was already waiting outside. Quiet, gray suits, the kind that moved without expression. Derek gathered what little paper he had, but his eyes stayed locked on me. Not defiant, just stunned. A man whose world had been coded by someone else. As he passed, I turned toward him. My voice was soft. No cruelty, no triumph, just the truth, worn like iron under silk. "You should have read what you signed." He flinched like the sentence itself had mass. And then he was gone. I turned back to the board. No applause, no nods of approval, just a slow, collective recalibration. The room itself seemed to lean differently now. Like the building had shifted 1 inch to the left and no one could explain why. I reached into my bag, pulled out a small card, and placed it on the center of the table. "My updated directory profile," I said. The card was blank except for one word, etched in clean black font: architect. Not a title. A reality. The foundation, the designer, the firewall, the backbone. I walked out without another word. Let them rebuild what they broke. This time under my terms, by my design. Appreciate you sticking around, you legends of the break room. Subscribe for more chaos. Let's make your old managers spill their coffee in fear.